Hi there and welcome back to the CKM Red Rugby League channel. You will notice that Luke Jobson looks very different because that is not Luke Jobson. That is Oliver from Rugby League, in my opinion. Go check him out. He's kind enough to jump on, help me out with the Super League preview. How are you going, mate?
I'm doing very well, Matt. Thanks for having me on. And I've known your page for a little while now, and I love the content that you put out. So I'm more than happy to come on here and help you out for this Super League preview, the return.
Likewise, mate. All his links are going to be down in the description wherever you're watching it. If it's on Facebook, in the comments. If it's on YouTube, in the description. Go check him out. Honestly, great page, great content. Only getting better too. So we will jump straight into the first game of the return of the Super League, and that is St Helens versus Catalans. It's going to be a tough one to call. Saints are a little off the boil since the return of Super League, and not the start that Christian Wolf will have expected out of the side that won the comp last year.
Yeah, definitely. I was a bit shocked to see the first few weeks of the season. Obviously, different teams have played a different number of games, and we've obviously seen the Wolfpack dropping out and that impact that sort of had on the ladder and the different results. But St Helens would have been expecting to do a lot better, especially after the season they had last year. Obviously, Luke Thompson is a big loss, but they are far from a one-man team. I know at least over here in Australia, he's the main guy that we were hearing about because there were rumours for months that he was coming over here. Then, of course, now that he's come to the Bulldogs. But very surprising. They've pretty much got a good team all around, and from a team that really gave it to the Sydney Roosters as well in the World Club Challenge. I thought that they'd probably go on with it, and honestly, I'm a bit surprised that they aren't up, in that top four right now, probably even top two. However, I do think that they will probably come good as the season goes on.
Yeah, and it's all a learning curve. Christian Wolf will undoubtedly have massively benefited from that extended break, get to know his players a little bit more, understand the team cohesion. It's got to be said as well, Saints were missing some key players, the likes of Mark Percival. James Bentley had been playing out in the centres for a little while. He'd even had to come in back from the second row and start moving around in those backs and into that rotation spot. You got James Graham coming back. That's undoubtedly going to be a huge boost. Jammer brings passion wherever he goes. He brings it in buckets, and he'll be that guy where if you're trailing with 10 minutes to go, he'll be the guy that's in your ear, screaming at you, getting you fired up. Just the level of leadership and character that he actually brings will be a huge influence. And Saints can only really grow from having a leader like that back in their team.
100%, and especially that he's at St Helens as well. I believe that's the only team he would have really wanted to go back to. Earlier in the year, there were rumours that he'd finish up the season with the Dragons and then go elsewhere or retire. And I've been calling it as it just makes sense for him to go back to St Helens, especially with Luke Thompson headed to the Bulldogs now. It's just something that makes a lot of sense. And, it's kind of nice, full circle. Thompson's really been called the next James Graham, leaving St Helens and, literally following in Graham's footsteps to go to the Bulldogs. Now James Graham back at St Helens. It'll be great. I think it'll be great for James Graham to really be back in a side that he's passionate about, that he really wants to play for. He was still giving his all at the Dragons. However, it was a bit, I think he wanted to stay at the Bulldogs, right? And now he gets to go back to his first club. And he is just a guy that feeds off of that passion. He'll be feeding off the passion wearing that St. Helens jersey. Mate, I'm keen to watch him get back out there and play. Keen to see the impact he has on the side. Whether or not it will be, okay, you slip straight into Thompson's old role, which I think he could do. Obviously, there's a huge age gap there, but I think James Graham is still a very talented player despite his age, and I am really looking forward to him seeing him back in a Saints jersey.
Yeah, And we'll get on to Catalans, and they're looking good. They were travelling okay pre-lockdown. Wins against Salford, a narrow win against Hull FC, a win against Castleford as well. So it's it's going to be interesting to see how they go, especially with the fact that they'll be travelling across. Worth noting as well that they are playing at St Helens. Their last win against St Helens at home coming April 14th, 2016. So this is not a ground that they do well on. I mean, in the last 5 meetings, you got it going across the bottom there. Saints winning 4 of the last 5, and even so, they're not pretty results in Catalan's favour. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes on. Of course, the introduction of 6 again. You've seen what that's done to some bigger sides. It's got to be said, Saints have some of the bigger and more physical players, especially in that forward pack. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get on, because there's quite a few aging players in there. You've got, I imagine, probably Kyle Amor might take over as a starting prop from Thompson, and Graham Hughes as an impact player. Even so, Amor's no spring chicken. He's still got a few years left in mind, but got Walmsley as well, another big physical body in there. So if Catalans can get them on the ropes early, Saints might struggle here against a side that is, you look at Catalans and they're the form team going into this. 1 loss in their last 4. But, yeah.
100%. The thing that sort of worries me a bit about the Catalans, though, is that break, and I guess sort of that added impact of, COVID and coming from France, and, the stuff that they'll have to go through as well. I believe at one point when they announced that the Premier League was back on, one of, if not the main reason that the Super League wasn't announced as well, and they still had to work stuff out, is because the French government were really sort of strict on teams like the Catalans participating in the competition. So maybe that's knocked them around a bit. I'm not too sure. But they have had a great start to the season. They've looked great, of course. They've recruited very well. Obviously, the 2 players who come to mind, James Maloney, Israel Folau. I'm leaning towards Saints here, though, purely because what you mentioned, that record, but also Saints need a win. They need to get off the ground and running quickly. Catalans could probably afford that loss, and I'm guessing that it's hard to predict, but I think COVID might have impacted them more than a couple of the other sides, and I think that it might take them a couple of weeks to adjust, get back into the groove of things, and they are coming up against the defending champs as well. So I'm going with the champions here. I'm going with St. Helens to get the win. I don't think it will necessarily be a very close game, but I don't think it'll be a big flogging either. I think St. Helens will probably be the team in control for most of the game. But yeah, look, Castleford could win. Wouldn't be surprised if they did win. They are the form side of the competition. However, I'm relatively confidently picking the Saints.
Yeah, so I think I'd be leaning towards Saints as well, just because they've had that little bit of time to gel. It is worth noting, though, that out of the 3 of the first 5 that Saints have lost, they have all been the second team to score. So it's going to be, if Saints get off to a good start, they see this game out. If they don't and they're fighting their way back, they're yet to come from behind to win a game. So I can see St. Helens potentially struggling, because Catalans, they are a dogged team this year. They are very strong. But based on that away travel, the fact that they've, it's going to be tough for them getting across. They've got all these extra checks as well now when they're getting through, that added stress, that added tension. I can see potentially knocking Catalans for 6 there. So, yeah, I'm going to lean towards Saints. I'm going to say that they're probably going to turn their season around at this point after what has got to be said from the reigning champions, a pretty disappointing start. But with bringing back players like Lachlan Coote, Mark Percival, if he's running fit as well, then I can see Saints winning this. But yeah, it's going to be a slim margin for me.
100%. And this is, for me, sort of must win for St. Helens as well. They need to get firing now.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, then we will move on to the second game. It is the Huddersfield Giants taking on the Leeds Rhinos. Huddersfield, has got to be said, were one of the surprise packages for this season. They're travelling really well. They've done some good recruiting. Kenny Edwards, Aidan Caesar, James Gavitt all coming in. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of James Gavitt from lockdown. He is huge now. He has trimmed right down. The guy is going to be more than favouring the 6 again rule if he is as fit as he looks.
The thing is too, I'm not sure if you've seen on his Instagram, he did that noodle challenge, cooked up all that ramen noodles, and it was like 12 packets of ramen noodles, put them in a bowl, and he just like ate it. He demolished the whole thing. He is a big guy, and yeah, I mean, that diet might not help if he's eating that much too often, but and I think I saw as well, he said for a snack he'll have like 2 packets, and then like if he has it for lunch he'll have 4 or something. He's just crazy, but it shows how big a guy he is and how big he can take. I think he's sort of connection again. It's a team that's recruited very well, just like the Catalans, and we have to look at Kenny Edwards and Aidan Caesar as well. Caesar, man, since he's gone to the Super League, he has been on fire. I'm not sure if he's currently leading the Man of Steel race. I think is it Paul McShane, but they're neck and neck right now. So
he's up there. He's definitely up there.
Yeah. If I had to tip right now, I'd say Caesar. However, there have been little reports that, sort of light reports that he doesn't want to go back because he is currently in Australia. He might have gone back by now, but I was hearing a little bit there that he was going back or that he wasn't. So I've heard conflicting reports. I think he'll probably go back. We haven't really heard of any NRL team interest anyway. But yeah, I think he should be pretty crucial. The thing is with me though, I'm not sold on them in this game necessarily. Just looking at the Rhinos, they've been back in great form. I don't think they've lost since that game against Hull FC in the first round where they were, taken care of pretty easily. And we look at Hull FC where they're at now. We didn't think we'd be seeing this after that game. However, Leeds look very good. So do the Giants. However, I've got a feeling that Leeds will probably get the win here. They've just looked a bit better. I need to see Aidan Caesar perform like this consistently, right? He has so far, but I know at least from his NRL days, he's had some periods where he's been a bit quieter, and I think he's never really been bad. But I just feel like Leeds are a bit more of a well-rounded team, and I feel like Huddersfield could fall into that sort of that trouble of relying too heavily on certain players like Caesar, like Gavet, like Edwards. But I feel like Leeds are a much more well-rounded team, and I think that they should get the win here.
Yeah, and it's worthwhile noting as well that Huddersfield, they've released Aku Uarte. He's gone now, so they do have a vacancy on the wing. It's looking like Senior will probably take his spot. I think it'd be Innes Senior that takes his spot out there. Because they are currently got Leroy Cudjoe racing the clock to try and get back. He's been out for quite some time as well, so it will be a big step up for him, especially coming back from so long, and then you're straight into a new environment of 6 again, where the game is faster. You've got it's going to take its toll on the older players. Let's be realistic. It is going to, and I think it's more well suited to a Rhinos pack. I mean, they've got some bigger bodies in there that will make impacts, but then they've got good rotation as well. You've got the potential of Cruz Leeman coming back to face his old side. There's been no news on that yet, and obviously Super League do things a little different. So whereas in the NRL you've got Teamless Tuesday and all the teams are named and come out on a Tuesday, so you know who's lining up. Super League wait until about 2 days before a game, and we can't be doing a preview literally every day. So it is what it is, and you've just got to go off the form guides. But even so, on the form guides, it's pretty neck and neck. There's nothing really splitting the teams besides the fact that Leeds have posted up some really good wins, some decent results there against Warrington, win against Salford, big win against Hull KR as well. Obviously, the Toronto win is chalked off and null and void at this point, but you've still got to take into account that even without their first choice fullback in Jack Walker, Richie Myler stepping in there, they did look really, really good. They didn't seem to miss Walker or look amiss without him, so I would expect a Leeds win. I mean, if you go down to the last 5 meetings, it's either been Leeds by a ton or a narrow win either way. There's not really been a Huddersfield blowout in comparison to those Leeds 44-0, 30-18, a narrow 28-25-18 win in favour of Huddersfield, and then a 22-all draw as well. It's always difficult in these teams because they are both fierce competitors.
I'd be very surprised if we saw a dominant Huddersfield victory. I can see them winning, and I don't necessarily even mean dominant in terms of on the scoreboard. I feel like the game will be a very close one too, and I feel like Leeds will probably have the control for the majority of the game. However, it's just when Huddersfield get those chances, when Leeds forwards start to get a bit more tired, can Aiden Caesar ignite that spark? They will be looking to him. But as I said, there will be times against certain teams in the season where they might look to him too much to get them out of a hole or to create some magic. And it'll be against the better sides. And Leeds are going to be one of the better sides this season, I believe. And yeah, I think Leeds win this one. And I'm going to say it'll be, look, I'll say within 12 points. I think it'll be a narrow victory for Leeds, and I believe they will control the game. But I wouldn't be surprised if Huddersfield eked out a victory here.
Yeah, and it's worth noting as well for anybody that is on the punt. In the last 5, more than 40 points scored in every single game. Worthwhile jumping on that. There's always points when these two meet, whether it's a Leeds blowout or a narrow Huddersfield win. But I'd expect this one to be tighter. I still think there's going to be points, but it's going to be a tight Leeds win. I'm thinking no more than 8 points realistically for the in favour of the Rhinos. But because Huddersfield are a threat this season, they've recruited really well, they've retained really well, they're bringing some good players as well. So, and that, as you mentioned, that Gaskell-Caesar combination clicked almost immediately. It's just a case of, do Huddersfield almost become like Salford of last season, where they're relying on that half to create things and go from there? Because I'm happy for Huddersfield in the fact that they've found a half pairing that works, because they've experimented with a few. I mean, Gaskell's been paired up with Brough, he's been paired up with Matt Frawley. Obviously, he's back at Canberra now. Things didn't work out in the Super League for him, so it's good that Huddersfield now have that coherent spine that's really starting to gel, and that's part of what makes them a real contender for at least the top 5 this season.
Yeah, 100%. I think they will probably make the top 5. I think they've shown me enough early on in the year to do that. But again, coming back from COVID, it's very hard to see how teams will perform. Probably we need to see at least a couple of weeks first. I mean, the Brisbane Broncos in the NRL are a big example. You'd have to predict, at least with me, the teams that have consistently been at that higher level for a few years now. So we're talking your Wiggins, St. Helens, Leeds for the most part. I'd chuck in Castleford, even Warrington. They'll definitely be sniffing around up there. But I feel like teams such as the Catalans and Huddersfield have shown enough pre-COVID to say that they're a final side. Will they replicate that? Will they be able to keep that up now that we've seen such a break? So for those two teams in particular, I'm going to be really interested to see how they go just because of this break, because it could be disastrous. If not, even if they drop in form a little bit, those other sides, Castleford's up there. We've got Warrington, who is generally a final side. So it'll be very interesting for me to see. And Leeds are back up there as well. So it'll be very tight. I could probably confirm right now, I think Wigan will be there. Leeds will be there. St. Helens should probably get back up in there. Those last two spots, for me, at the moment, it's hard to tell. Probably out of those four sides, Huddersfield, Catalans, Warrington, and Castleford. For me, it'll be a combination of two of those four. I've just got to see how they react coming out of COVID.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, there's only 2 games this week because of the late dropout of Toronto. I mean, what's your thoughts on the situation?
It's a very sad situation for me, especially with those visa issues. I really hope Toronto are back and are strong next year, because Toronto are crucial for, I guess, the mainstream sort of global expansion of rugby league. The NRL have tried to expand into America and countries like that, and really failed a couple of times over the past few years because they've just not done it correct. The Wolfpack are an example of the opposite, right? They have, for starters, they're a club playing in a professional competition from North America. That's already going to have people interested. You know what I mean? So it's crucial that we have Toronto sustained and that they'll be back next season, so that teams like Ottawa have that chance, so that teams like New York have that opportunity. So I think it's crucial that they're in and around that Super League mix, and it's crucial that they're there at all. With Sonny Bill, it looks like he's coming back to the Roosters. One thing that I liked Peter V'landys actually said today is that I don't think he wants Toronto to have to tear up his contract. I think Peter V'landys has said he is happy for that to be a separate contract. He's with the Roosters, and for him to have 2 contracts, a contract with the Chooks till the end of the season, and for him to return to Toronto next year. So, for the head of the ARL commission to say that, he wants Sonny Bill to be able to return to Toronto next year, I guess that's a positive, right? I guess if Peter V'landys is saying that, that's a very good thing. I do want to see the other Toronto players that have played in the NRL before or are Australian come over to the NRL. One player in particular, just because I've spoken to him, I've interviewed him before, Blake Wallace. He's been at Toronto since the very beginning. I spoke to him about a week ago, and I was like, well, do you have an idea of what you're going to do from here? He says, not at the moment. He's currently in Toronto. So I hope that an NRL team gives him a chance, especially because he's the only one, I think, out of the Aussie players who hasn't played in the NRL before. He's played in the Queensland Cup. He's played in the New South Wales Cup, so he's been in the systems. But, a team like the Bulldogs or even the Titans, they could do worse than bringing him in for the rest of the year. At least it's something different, gives them an opportunity to compete with the other teams that are near them on the ladder. Hell, even the Broncos could have a go with him in the halves. So he's one player in particular I want to see get a chance. But I hope, honestly, I hope that they all come back over to the NRL, at least for a period of time. And you know what? We've seen a couple of, player movements from Toronto to other Super League teams as well. I hope that continues. And I hope, pretty much at least that 17 gets an opportunity at other Super League clubs for the rest of the season or in the NRL. That's the main thing for me, that this doesn't ruin anyone's career.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me because I'm a passionate expansionist. I've done a lot of work in and around rugby league on rugby league expansion, and it's disappointing because what I hope that Super League and the RFL don't take away from this is that expansion is unsustainable and therefore it needs completely ban Jackson. It's tough really because you've got teams like Ottawa and New York. I mean,
yeah,
they have a huge advantage here in that they can look at the failures and the shortcomings of Toronto and go, right, okay, that is our learning path. We stay clear of that path and we do things our way. I mean, Perez is a good administrator. He's a good rugby league administrator. If he can bring in players from a Canadian background, and he does very much like the the West Wales Raiders did, in which it was like, right, okay, we don't care about results for the first 3 or 4 seasons. It's all about getting players from those areas into the team and developing the game. That's fantastic. New York, however, have a distinct advantage in that there are already very good teams in and around New York. You look at the Brooklyn Kings, the Boston 13s, stacked with great players. A former Red Star player, well, 2 former Red Star players out there, Jamil Robinson, Brandon Anderson, both had stints at our club. Really good players, great work ethic. Jamil would slot right in. He's a fantastic player. He really is. He's got solid work ethic.
I've spoken to Jamil before and had a look at his, especially last season was when I really started looking at the USARL, and man, him and Brandon Anderson, they're built. They have the bodies of sort of Olympic runners, I'd say, and, you know, they have that speed, they have that ability. I know for New York as well, just because I interviewed him a little while ago, Connor Donahue, he said in the interview he would love a shot at, you know, playing in the halves for that New York team. So there is definite interest from, you know, a lot of domestic talent, understandably so as well. Even someone like a Kevin Reed Jr., while we're on the Kings, he would fit in there nicely. So I want to see guys like that get an opportunity. However, you need a nice blend, especially for New York. You need to be able to bring in bigger players from Super League, from the NRL, but I think have that base. And it's like what you said, there's already that established sort of competition of the USARL, and there's already, you know, they are the current champions, the Brooklyn Kings, who would be the closest side to New York. So they'll, in theory, inherit some players from there, which will be very good, I'd say. And, you know, throw in a Kieran Foran or a Benji Marshall, which is like what's been rumoured or suggested as a sort of marquee player. It is looking very good for New York in that aspect. I just hope, you know, the shortcomings and what is currently happening with Toronto doesn't have that knock-on effect for Ottawa and for New York.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Even so, there's things for Toronto where I'm like, okay, certain things were inevitable, but you look at things and it was obvious signs of mismanagement. I mean, only having 21 players and still being up to your cap, that's a huge problem. You know, seeking dispensation, throwing mad money at a marquee. When they signed Sonny Bill, I was really excited because I was like, this is a huge marketing ploy. This is fantastic. They can claim their money back in sponsorships, in merchandise, all these things, because he's a huge pull. And chances are there's a lot of Canadians that do follow rugby union and will have seen the name about and will draw interest to it. But when you've got, you know, players' families taking to Twitter and Instagram to call out the fact that they've not been paid, that staff have not been paid, there's legal issues, you need to almost kind of park the bus for a little while and say, right, okay, maybe now's not the time for us to be here, which is incredibly unfortunate. But if, as a club administrator myself, I know that there's certain things you can and cannot do, and the players have got to be paramount. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that, in such a short career as well, they're the ones that go out, they risk their bodies, they risk their livelihoods. You know, in certain occasions, they risk their lives. So you've got to make sure that you've always got to make sure that the players are paid. You've always got to make sure that your back room's looked after, because otherwise it spills out onto the pitch, it spills out into the media. Have unhappy players, you're not going to win games. Have unhappy staff, you know, then you end up with media attention and all this stuff. So the Toronto situation is incredibly unfortunate, but it's of their own doing, unfortunately. And I think that's what hurts a little bit more from an expansion point of view.
Yeah, definitely. The main thing for me is that the Super League and the RFL see this as they don't see this, as expansions failing. This is because they are an expansion side, whatever. It's really not. At the end of the day, if not for COVID, they probably would have been all right. You know what I mean? But it's purely because of that I guess the crap's hit the fan. And it's sort of given them that nudge, you know, over the point here where they are having these financial difficulties and not being able to pay players and so on and so forth. So I guess from me, the main thing is that the RFL and the Super League do not see this as a failed expansion. They see this as one of the many things that COVID has caused and impacted. As you said, it is Toronto's own doing and the management. However, if not for this global pandemic, they probably would have been able to manage it. Now, it unfortunately, they can't.
Yeah, and I mean, you look to the sacrifices that the Warriors have made. I mean, one of the things that Toronto did cite is like, well, why are we going to do this if we're not going to be getting any gate receipts? We're going to struggle. It's no different from the situation at the Warriors, and no team. It's something that every expansion team is realistically going to come up against at some point. That you are literally you're paying through the back end to play, and you know things like that can only be fixed through having a fan base, by having pathways. And it's one of the reasons why I look at New York in particular and see that as such an incredibly strong bid, because they have pathways very similar to that of Catalans and Toulouse, in which there's competitions that sit beneath them, and those players are almost called up to a second tier of expansion, where it's if you're good enough, you will play for us. If you're in America and you're good enough, we don't care if you're in Tampa, if you're in Jacksonville, if you're out anywhere in the States, we will draft you in to come and play for us. It almost becomes like a second international call-up.
Yeah, 100% for them. And as you said, that's sort of like playing for the Catalans or Toulouse, or it will be hopefully for Canadian players. I know at least Ottawa have said that they are looking to invest heavily in Canadian players. There are obviously Canadian players at Toronto, for example, Quinn Nawadi. But I feel like it is sort of that that sort of representative call up. You know, in France, you got the elite one. Canada sort of need, I guess, that that competition or that sort of that team in the sort of periphery. Maybe we'll end up seeing Ottawa act like a bit of a feeder or a step towards Toronto at a point. I know they wouldn't like that. However, that could end up being the case for a little while at least. I could see that happening. But yeah, I really do think that you do. How do I put this? You need to be, when you're growing these expansion teams, the main thing that helps them survive and grow the game in their areas is, I'd say, at least 60% of the side being domestic. So I think we need to put things in place for these clubs to say, okay, you need to have 60% Americans here for New York, 40% expansion, or even when they come up the grades, you sort of change that a bit, but you've always got to have that domestic quota. I think that's the important thing, you know, like the national teams have when they're playing in a Rugby League World Cup or something, for example. There is that domestic quota, and I think we sort of need to introduce one here into the clubs to really help the competition and to really help Rugby League grow in their areas.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with that, we leave it there. What's to come of Toronto will be decided by Super League and the RFL, and whether that has a knock-on impact into those other bids, we'll have to wait and find out. Fingers crossed it doesn't. But no, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you again for joining me. Go check out Rugby League, in my opinion. Honestly, a fantastic growing page. A lot of work goes into it, a lot of time and effort as well. So make sure you go over there, like all his socials, just give him all the love, all the love. And thanks again for joining me, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.